Hi guys, today I have my video which is going to be talking about how to improve the VCS and PCS. So I've got a little PowerPoint here. I'm just going to go through and talk about an array of different topics and how they can be addressed. So let's start by talking about worlds. Now this video is obviously going to be quite negative because I'm going to be talking about the things which can be improved, but it's worth stating that worlds was pretty great for one of the regions, right? VCS did really well. Obviously, we made Swiss. We went 1-3. We beat TL. All good there. Wales, they beat BDS. VCS looks super strong. Whereas PCS, they faltered, right? CFO didn't look very good at all. PSG should have beat BDS and they completely choked it. I actually think if PSG did play out the series and drafted normally and they went 3-0, they can probably beat most Western teams if they went to Swiss. But obviously they choked and people are going to think that PCS is really weak. The reality is it's not. PSG is a good team. They messed up, sure, but the whole region is not actually that strong. But PSG is very, very good. Okay, so let's start off by talking about ping. Now, if you don't know the general geography of East Asia, we need to talk about how much ping there is when you are scrimming each other or playing solo queue or even your official matches. So if we are in Vietnam and you want to scrim a Korean team, Korean teams are only going to play on their Korean tournament round, so we will play on 70 ping and they'll play on 0. If you are a VCS team playing against a PCS team in Taiwan, you're looking at around 35, and then of course the Vietnamese teams on stage will play on 0. If you're in Hong Kong, so where I was last year with Frank, their scrims would be about 60 MS to Vietnam, 30 to Taiwan, 70 to Korea. These numbers are a bit weird, but I think they just had worse VPNs and worse exit lag stuff, whatever. And when they play their stage games, they actually play remote. So this is what PSG did for a few years, but they moved to Taiwan this year. And this is what Frank has been doing for the past 2 years. So they play their games remote until playoffs, and then they would fly in. So why is this a problem? Well, let's start with Vietnam, right? So who are the VCS teams going to scrim against? Currently, they only scrim against PCS teams. It's pretty much that. The only other teams you will scrim is maybe some Challenger League teams, maybe some LCK Academy teams. Very occasionally, you might scrim an LGL team. Scrimming Chinese teams is really difficult because they have their own Chinese tournament realm, and it's a whole thing where you don't really scrim Chinese teams. It's very rare for that to happen. So you're basically just scrimming against PCS for the most part. Do they scrim against each other? No. And this is going to be the first point that I want to talk about. PCS and VCS both do this. They don't scrim internally within their region. I think this affects VCS more than PCS due to just the geography. PCS is right in the middle here. They do scrim LGL a lot. The ping's a lot lower, teams are more comfortable, they're more familiar, it's a closer time zone. This is also something to consider. So let's say Vietnam is 1 p.m. It'll be 2 p.m. in PCS, and it'll be 3 p.m. in Japan and Korea. There's this time zone issue you now have. If you want to play a night block in Vietnam, it's like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. for these teams, and they just absolutely run it down in the night blocks. So the ping, causes a big problem, especially for the VCS teams, because it's 2-hour difference to Korea and Japan, plus the high ping. It's a struggle. Now these teams usually will play on their host or their server. Sometimes a PCS team might agree to having the server in Hong Kong, right? So it's a little bit in between. They're playing on like 30 MS, you're playing on 30, 40, something like that. It's kind of an in-between one. Sometimes you get that, sometimes you don't, right? Normally you'll end up playing on the PCS servers because they want to play low ping. And if you're a VCS team, you're playing on high ping or an awkward amount of ping. Now, if you're playing solo queue to Korea, your Korean solo queue is going to be like 60 MS. Not great practice. Your scrims a variety of different pings. There's so many things going on where you're playing on different ping all the time. And then I know that most of you might not think this is a big deal, but it is when you are a professional player trying to be the best in the world and best in your region, and you're playing these highly intense mechanical champions and you are playing on a different ping every single day. You're not going to be able to get high quality practice, which sucks, but there really isn't much you can do. So who's Scrim 2? So VCS basically stuck with PCS. PCS can have basically anyone because of their time zone and distance for the ping. It's a lot better for them. Okay, so let's move on from the scrims, where I've said that I think internal scrims are the first thing that both regions should do. VCS should scrim internally, so they can avoid only scrimming versus PCS, and PCS should also scrim internally to avoid playing all these different regions. But the whole idea of scrimming internally is to improve your region. It brings everyone up. Now, no one in VCS or PCS will buy into this at all. They're never going to do it. If you scrim someone in your own league, the players will just play worse. They don't want to show their true level. You don't want to show anything. Players won't take it seriously, and it's basically just a waste of practice, which really sucks. But if we could somehow convince players to buy into it, you're much more likely to improve the whole region. Even if it's just like 1 or 2 blocks a week or whatever, I think it would really help, especially PCS. Now, why is that? PCS will scrim against VCS, and those scrims are very, very different for one of those teams compared to the stage games. VCS stage games, kind of bloody, scrims very bloody. PCS scrims, very bloody. PCS stage games, absolutely nothing is happening. There's a big, big problem there for the PCS, and we'll get onto that later. Okay, let's move on to solo queue. Everyone knows the solo queue accounts are a problem on the Korean server. So for the past 2 years, due to certain bad players, right? Korean accounts have been really hard to get. And if you do get them, you buy them illegally or whatever. You go through elo boosting companies and Smurf account companies, and you're giving them a lot of money to get these Korean accounts. They cost a lot because they need to be constantly verified, and they sometimes get locked. You need them unlocked. There's a lot of money just going into these Smurf companies from PCS, VCS, LJL, even China, LPL teams. Now these accounts cost money, and the money for VCS and PCS teams is not insignificant, and that sucks, right? Imagine you want to play on your Korean account, you spend 100 games to get to Masters or whatever, and you lose your account for whatever reason. Okay, you've now played 100 games in Diamond MMR to get your Korean account to Masters, you've just lost that. Now you have to do it again. What also sucks, these accounts have no champions. I have talked to PCS and VCS players before in the past 2 years and asked them their opinion on a certain champion, and they will tell me, sorry, I don't have that champion on my Korean account, I can't practice them, I don't have an opinion on them right now, blah, blah, blah. Even when we want to try something in scrims, I will say, oh, can you practice this? And they might say, oh, I don't have that champion. It's a completely big problem, but I will say, over the past year, that the PCS, LPL, and LJL accounts do not get banned. However, if you are a VCS player, your account will still get banned for some reason. I don't really know why this is, but yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on there for VCS players to always get their accounts banned straight away, but the other regions seem to be okay. Like, I have a picture here of just Janjia's account. He's had this account for a couple years now. So he was obviously in LPL last year, and now he's in PCS, and his account's still here. So that's kind of interesting. But if you're a VCS player, you will lose your account if you use something like Deeplo, where you can scout players. So if I want to look at Kia for one example, well, there we go. The only account which is going to pop up is the Worlds Bootcamp account we had. So this account here is his Masters account. He's not playing on anymore. I don't know if he's lost it, but this was the one they got from Worlds. And then all of these are just deleted accounts, right? You get an account, it'll get deleted. It sucks, right? And there are some players on here that you can find within the VCS. I won't show them because I don't want them to get banned or anything, right? But some players are on here. Maybe they will get banned soon, maybe they won't. But as far as I know, there's been no dialogue between Riot and the teams. So teams just mindlessly buy accounts, and there's this fear that you're going to lose them. I know players sometimes use some weird IDs. They will pretend to be an academy player for LCK or whatever, so they might just have some random team name like Nongshin blah blah blah, Genji blah blah blah, T1 blah blah blah, just to try and hide their account. I always find that funny. Or they just use Korean IDs, whatever it is. But it sucks, right? Teams are wasting a lot of money. They don't know if their accounts will get banned. They waste a lot of time. They can't improve. Now, we can just say, okay, maybe they should just play on their own servers, play on the Taiwan server and play on the Vietnam server. Well, there is a problem with that. And we're going to talk about Slater. Now, Slater, in our first playoff game, made this Kai'Sa build. It was the Dustblade into Dirk into AP. Now, this is not too different to the Umbral Dustblade into AP build, which is now common. However, this patch was like peak Shiv, so Shiv was super OP still, and we never scrimmed with this build. I had never seen him build this. No one in the team had seen it before, but he played it a couple of days before in solo queue, and he popped off in it, right? He did really well in solo queue. He even made a YouTube video about it. He uploads his scrim highlights, and he played this in Vietnam solo queue, what he thinks is very strong because he did really well in solo queue there. And the reality is that server's quality is not good enough for a professional player. It's nowhere near as good as Korea. It's still a lot better than the Taiwanese server. So any PCS player is never going to touch that server. It is completely worthless. So it's very important for PCS teams to have their Korean accounts. If they lose their accounts, they cry. The Taiwan server is much, much, much worse. So I will give credit that the Vietnam server is better, but it's still not good enough for these players, where they can just build whatever they want and have these warped ideas on what's good and what's not. I remember last year, VCS was playing AP Sejuani. I have absolutely no idea where the hell that came from. Probably the solo queue in Vietnam, right? It's things like that where their practice environment is not good enough. The solo queue on these servers is not good enough. Now I know that the people in Vietnam will want their pros to play on their server to improve their server, and I get that. I think that's completely fair and acceptable, and it's true. You need the pros in there to help improve the server, especially academy players and the lower teams. You want all of these to play on your server. I agree, but it's not good enough for them. So if you want to be a very good player and you want VCS to improve, you want them to play in Korea. As simple as. It's a lot easier to give them Korean accounts than miraculously improve Vietnam tenfold. And same with Taiwan. Taiwan server is just completely dead. You can't improve there as a pro. So you need to play on Korea. Okay. So the quick fix for this is Riot. Just give them accounts again, or some sort of dialogue. Have an understanding of what's okay and what's not okay, because spending all this money and giving them to Smurf sites and your fear of losing your account, you don't have all champions, you waste time playing on these accounts which might get banned for whatever reason, you have no idea what's going on, is obviously not healthy. Now this is a bigger problem when it comes to developing the regions, which I will talk about later, but the quick fix is either one, give all these teams accounts again, or two, have some sort of open dialogue. Do we have an understanding on who's getting banned and who's not getting banned? Why is the VCS players only getting banned, but certain accounts are not getting banned? Why? What's going on? Like, what's the rules here? Because it seems like everyone I've talked to has no idea what the rules are. We don't know why you get banned. We don't know when it's going to happen. Things like that. It really sucks. So, yep, that's obviously really lame. Okay, let's move on to meaningful practice. And this comes from the top of the teams in PCS and VCS. So that would be your general manager, the head coach, whatever it is. But these figures just don't have enough power or enough of a voice. Most of these teams in these leagues are player run. A lot of the decisions are made by players. A lot of the practice is wasted by players. And it really sucks. So a lot of the days you're going to scrims, you're really ready, you go into your games, and the enemy people are just running it down relentlessly, and you can feel that they do not care. They don't want to be there. There's hour-long reviews, and there's no respect for each other. Teams will just disappear. Games can be like 10 minutes long into a remake and to a 1-hour review, and you have no idea what's going on. They don't really talk to each other. It's just really, 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 really annoying. I know that G2 this year, they did their like time block allocation where they scrimmed for 5 hours, and sometimes it'd be 5 games, but sometimes it'd be 6, 7, or 8 games in that block. And I like that idea, but getting that to apply to PCS or VCS scrim culture sounds impossible, especially because we played the 2x3. But I think if you made them 3-hour blocks and shortened the review time, you could get 4 or 5 games in these 3-hour blocks, because some of these games are just disgusting. And like over in like 10-15 minutes, no remake, and players don't want to play, they want their break. It sucks, right? So it's really hard to have meaningful practice when players don't really care what's going on and they don't use the scrims productively. I've heard the term building synergy for a lot of scrim goals, and it's not a real goal, in my opinion. You should go into the scrim with some actual tangible ideas on what you want to improve on. But building synergy, especially like early on in the split, teams will just use this for like a few weeks or maybe months or whatever. It's building synergy, practicing comms, blah blah blah. There's no real goals here. There's no way of tracking it. There's nothing set specific. It's kind of very vague, and I feel like teams are not really using their prep time to improve. And this goes for strategic planning. And I have Artemis here. So going into VCS, we knew that Team Wales is going to play around Artemis. That's been his MO for however many years. Everyone knows Artemis is super carry, and they're going to funnel him resources, okay? That's their win con number one. It's been like that for over a year. Okay, are Team Wales going to develop another strategy? No, they didn't, which sucks, right? So I think Wales could have quickly realized that, hey, Artemis is our first win con. Let's develop some other strategies. Let's try some different styles. Let's try to make some other things work. And that is why Kiaya cannot lose VCS, because no team in VCS is willing to do any sort of strategy to try and win top. He just gets left on an island where he always wins 1v1, or he'll have assistance from his team and carry through top. And every other team in VCS is just fighting and messing around and just trying to carry through bot, because that's what happens in their scrims. They'll do some level 3 dive and they think they can only carry through bot. But that's why Kiaya is the GOAT in VCS, basically. He just always wins through top, and other teams have no idea how to do that. And I think we, again, were able to show that we could play through bot as well. So we could match all this aggression that teams are throwing to the bot lane. We had an even to winning mid lane and a guaranteed winning top laner. It's impossible for us to lose because we knew what the other teams were going to do. Just send it bot. So it was very easy to read the other teams. It felt like they didn't evolve across the split at all. It felt like, despite it being BO3s and you have a lot of stage games to practice, teams weren't really using it productively to improve. So I think that's one area that the VCS and PCS can hugely improve on. But let's get back to the PCS. They scrim against VCS, as I mentioned before, and their stage games are BO1 and very boring, and nothing happens. Whereas the scrims are like 2 kills per minute, absolute fiesta, lanes are getting exploded, random things happen. But on stage, it doesn't happen. So that practice is completely different to their stage games, and it's really, 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 really poor practice for them. So I think PCS should really look at themselves and consider, is it worth scrimming VCS as much as they do? Now, I say that as a worry for VCS, because who are they going to scrim now? If PCS teams say, okay, your scrims are too much of a fiesta, on stage we play very safe, we can't risk it, we're not going to scrim you as much, then VCS has no one really left to scrim unless they want to play in the higher ping to Korean teams or Japanese teams, or they end up scrimming versus themselves. So it is awkward, because VCS teams get a lot out of the PCS scrims. PCS teams slow them down, and that makes it more like a VCS stage game. Whereas PCS stage and scrims are so different that it's not really worth it for them. And the reason is it's a BO1. Imagine if LCK was BO1. They would be the slowest games to ever exist, and it would be really, really boring. Now, I could say PCS needs to change their format, and they do, but I don't know how reasonable that is. So I think very, very, very important thing for PCS would be some sort of change of format. It needs to go to BO2 or BO3. Something needs changing. I don't know why they're still doing the LCS format. I guess there's some sort of riot reasons, but yeah, everyone in the region's not doing that. Even LJL wasn't doing that. So I hope they change something this year, because it sucks for the players and teams. Their scrims are just completely useless. They step on stage, they're playing a BO1. They pick the same champions over and over. They're not taking risks, and it sucks. So you see a lot of teams like CFO and BO1s, they suck this year. And it was the same as last year. BYG, they came into playoff 6th seed because they suck in BO1. Because they're so scared, they don't know how to play these slow games. And once it gets to the BOs, they're a lot more open. They're a lot more creative. They're a lot happier. And they can try things. So I think it's crazy that 2 years in a row with BYG and then CFO, these teams come in very low in the playoffs and they end up making top 2 to go to Worlds. All because they cannot play this stuff. It's crazy. Okay. So let's keep going. Let's talk about laning. Okay, this is mainly VCS. VCS players just can't lane. They don't know how to lane. They can't really improve. And that is because there is a lack of lane coaching and a massive lack of Korean solo queue. Like I said, they have to play in Vietnam. Every against a Fiesta is solo queue. They can't really learn anything. Whereas if they had Korean solo queue accounts, they would be able to lane a lot better. And it extends. 2v2s and 1v1s. This is not really a thing that happens in VCS and PCS. It's very rare that teams really want to do this. Some teams do, some teams don't. I've seen a variety of it being successful and pretty much useless. And a lot of the useless is what players will cite when you ask them, oh, do you want to do 2v2s or 1v1s? They'll say, oh, it's useless. We don't want to show we're better than them, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know what the fix is for that. So that's more of a player thing. Players need to accept to be willing to do 2v2s and 1v1s. The laning coaches thing is a problem because players in VCS and PCS don't have coaches they respect. The only team that really did is PCS, right? Because they have Corgi who won Worlds. The players respect him. The PSG players are a lot more mature, and that org seems to be set up in a very healthy way. And most other teams in PCS and VCS, they won't really listen to their coaches, especially for like micro and specific things like laning. Macro and different sorts of things in the game they'll listen to, but laning specifically is more of a thing where a coach will say, oh, you messed up this lane, go learn how to do it better. And it's more of a homework assignment for the player. Go learn how to lane better, blah, blah, blah. Or players will just say, I'm not listening to you, this is how the lane should go. And the coach will just say, okay, because they don't know is watch. So that sucks. Now, what is the fix for that? I don't really know. Either you find better coaches to help with laning, or players need to drop ego, or number 3, you just get some random Korean player to be a lane coach for them. And for some reason, since they're Korean, players will probably listen because it's absolutely ridiculous. And it's like a joke, but it will work. You could just find some random Korean ex-pro, get him in for a couple hours or whatever to go through laning or some matchups, and I think players would listen. So I think that's something all VCS and PCS teams should definitely look into. So yeah, laning really sucks in VCS. PCS is a lot better, and I think that's because they play on Korea. All of their solo queue practice on Korea for 2 years. It's a lot better of an environment. Next, let's talk about the issues with players. VCS has no mid laners. Everyone knows. Everyone talks about how Kati didn't do well at Worlds last year, and then MSI. Obviously, he did really well at Worlds this year, and so did Glory. Both of them did really well. And people think that the VCS mid laners are actually quite good and very strong, but I think those two maybe overperformed, but also people now warp their opinion on VCS mid laner strength. They are the only two really good ones, and they did really well. So it makes people think that the depth is quite strong, but I don't think it is. So I think there is not really an easy way to fix this, right? I don't know what the solution is, but this is just stating a problem, that the mid pool is a really, really big problem. Next up, FAK and PCS. They are an all Hong Kong roster. That's their identity. kind of like RNG was all Chinese for a long time now. But basically, the only Hong Kong pros are the ones that are on the team or they're known, right? So that kind of sucks for them. They have no other choices. All the Taiwan talent just ends up going to LPL. So if you're a PCS team trying to get some young Taiwanese talent, they go if they're good, right? All the old Flash Wolves players, Doggo, Fofo, Scam after his 1 year, and then Solo Kill, Kenny Chan, and Jinjia, who all played in PCS this year, will maybe go back to LPL, right? They've probably all got trials. They're going to play those trials. If they do well enough, maybe they'll get an LPL spot. I don't think they would take an LDL spot because I think PCS salary is probably a lot more comfortable for them than LDL. And I think YSCAM really laid the blueprint. You come into PCS, you just smash, you do really well there, and you'll get an LPL offer. That's what worked for him, and I think that's what these three players tried doing. I don't know if Soloka and Kenny Chan did that well, to be honest. Junji obviously did really well, so I think he should have some offers, but he wants to be on a world's level team. So is he going to want to go play for, I don't know, who's a terrible LPL team? I don't know, LGD. He's not going to want to go join LGD, right? Whereas these two players, they might be more desperate to get an LPL, so they might just take an offer. But the point is, all of the good Taiwan players, if they are good, they go, right? If you're from PCS and you're good enough, you go to LPL. There's more money, you just go. As simple as that. So VCS has big mid problem, and then PCS just has lack of players. All the good players leave. Now, let's talk about the server sizes. Now, Taiwan has a very small server, only around 290k in rank play. It's kind of a guesstimate. I don't really know 100%. It's like I did some funky maths to try and get that number. Whereas the Vietnamese server is almost double. It's twice as big. So Vietnam has a lot of players, but they super need to improve their development. There is somewhat of an academy league being put together, as far as I know. There's a promotion tournament going on as I speak, which is great. There's 6 teams in there. They are looking to get promoted into VCS next year. And then PCS has their university league. So Taiwan has a university league. They have online tournaments all the time. They have an Asia Esports Championship. I can't remember the full name. But that's like, it's kind of like PCS EU Masters. Tons of teams will play that. It's like 200 teams, whatever. And there's a big prize pool. And normally the winner, or the 2 winning teams, or not the 2 winning teams, the number 1 and number 2 team in that tournament, they normally get PCS offers, or the whole team gets picked up. So that's like a really big thing, and easy for PCS to just see these players, lost the stage games, pick them up. And they had their promotion tournament as well, which had an open series, an open bracket with loads of new teams. They play in the whatever it's called, where they play versus LDL and Challenge League. Vietnamese teams are in that, but again, they don't really have practice all year, so it's kind of just sending them to their slaughter in that tournament. But PCS has development pieces. They have a lot stronger development, but they have no pool to work with, whereas Vietnam has a much larger pool, almost twice as big, but they have very little development. So both regions have their problems. Taiwan, there's not much you can really do, right? They are trying. There's just no players. If they're good enough, they leave. PCS just has a massive problem there. VCS can keep all their players. No one's leaving Vietnam. And they have a good pool. So if they just work on development, they can get a lot of good talent into the league and improve them there. But again, that comes back to, once they get into a team, are they improving? The reality is no. And the next part, we'll explain a little bit on that, is roster shuffles. In VCS, every single day is win now. Every team is win now mode. Every player is win now mode. Long-term future projects don't really work out. It's just like not a thing in VCS. Between spring and summer every year, there'll be a huge turnover, orgs disappearing, players dropping out, new players coming in, arguments, crazy stuff. Everything is always happening. But there's no long-term plan for improvement across the year, trying out your set of players which you had faith in at the start. As soon as you lose, boom, roster change. Even if you win. For example, GAM went 18-0 in spring. They sucked at MSI, and they wanted to change AD. And then they were able to get Pallet because he was free agent, because his org went boom, right? There's so much random stuff that happens in VCS and rosters constantly changing that players are always fighting for their career because there's low money. They're trying to stay in the league as desperately as they can. They're always trying to look as good as they can. And there's no real improvement as the league because all these players are changing teams. So every team is building synergy throughout summer. So the league just kind of sucks, which really hurts VCS. And because teams are constantly changing, there's a lack of good coaching and improving the players. It's very hard for this region to improve. So the way that we can fix this is, one, somehow try to give teams and orgs more faith to not constantly turn over their players, right? They need to see the bigger picture, which is improving over the year. If there is some way you can improve your roster for a reasonable fee, I'm sure that makes sense. But we need to stop this crazy turnover between spring and summer. And we're probably going to see it throughout the off-season now. We've got to the end of the year. Probably all 8 teams are going to change players. No team's going to really stand. And that's just the way VCS is. PCS, they tend to stick together a bit more. And that's why they can improve a bit over time. But VCS really struggles with that. And the young players that do come in, they come into terrible situations where orgs are just in win now mode. And there's not proper coaching. And it's very hard for them to improve. Now, we can talk about the development again quickly. If you play in Taiwan and you're an amateur, through the orgs, you can actually get Korean accounts and improve. Whereas if you're in Vietnam and you're an amateur player, it's very hard for you to get a Korean account. And it costs lots of money, like we talked about, and orgs won't really pay up for that. So that really sucks for Vietnamese development, which is another reason why Vietnam and VCS desperately needs these Korean accounts. Give them to orgs, let them have academy teams. They can then give their academy players Korean accounts, then they can improve, right? I don't know if you want to limit players on how much they play, because I think they should and still need to play the Vietnamese server because it's not terrible and they need it to grow. If all of the good players on that server left, then the region will get weaker. And they have a good pool, so you need to balance putting time into that server and improving, but also playing on career and actually just improving as a player. So there's a balance between improving the region and improving yourself. But especially for the top players in the region, they can't play the server seriously. It's not good enough practice for them. So let's do a quick TLDR on things that I would like to improve. Starting off with scrims, I would prefer if teams did more internal scrims to improve the region as a whole. Don't be so reliant on other regions. And we have a lot of issues with that, which is time zones, ping, language, which then results in stupidly long reviews, random cancels, silly reasons, lag every single scrim. It's just not great. So I think scrims internally would be really good if teams could decide if that would be a good thing, which I think it is, but they disagree. Next, solo queue accounts, talked about this, just give it to the players or some sort of dialogue, some sort of understanding. It really sucks. It's a really, 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 really big problem. Next part, meaningful practice. Teams need to use their scrims productively. So I don't know who is going to decide that or how that's going to work fundamentally across both regions. It's pretty much impossible, right? But I think there's opportunities and ways that you can improve your coaching staff or coaching practices, and a lot of it comes from players need to drop ego and be happy to actually improve. Next up, PCS needs to drop their BO1 format. It's completely worthless for them to scrim against these regions which fight, so their practice and stage is completely different. BO1 sucks. The Taiwanese University League, which is like weekdays, night times, has decent viewership, right? Instead, they play their stage games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the same time as LPL. No one wants to watch PCS if it's the same time as LPL. They're not getting any global viewers. They could try some experimental format where it's on different days. They do BO2s, BO3s, whatever. Try something. Like, we really can't be doing BO1s on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the same time as LPL. It sucks. It sucks. It's really not good. So PCS, fix your format. It sucks. VCS, get better at laning. A lot of ways you can do that, but please try to improve on this. the pool can't really fix this. This is just stating a problem. It's a big problem. Can't really be fixed. It sucks. Development, try to have some sort of VCS league, academy league. Try to develop the players without changing over rosters crazily. PCS, since you have no server to really work with and your pool kind of sucks, and if it's good, they leave, you're just going to have to import. It sucks, but you're going to have to. I know people joke about NA importing to cover up their lack of natural talent, like NA talent, but I mean, it's true to some point, right? Taiwan doesn't have enough good players to have 10 good PCS teams. They just don't. And they have decent development to get players into the region, but they still kind of suck, right? And even then, those players are still decent enough to beat the OS teams that come over, which really sucks for OS. Like OS, they need a whole other video, but I'm not going to make that because I'm not in OS. But I heard that when they came and they were scrimming against PCS Academy teams, they were losing to PCS Academy teams. And then playing stage games versus like the best teams in the region makes no sense. So that really sucks for them. But yeah, some sort of way to develop your players even better. I don't really know what they can do other than trying to import. They could even import from VCS. I think that would be something really cool that PCS could do, is import 2 Vietnamese players, and that team would probably do really well. Obviously, you have language issues, and translators cost money, and these teams don't have a lot of money, and housing and visas. It's a whole problem, right? There's not enough money in these regions to do these things easily, so it is difficult. But yeah, I think that covers the main points. But yeah, I hope you learned something. Thanks.